The tide recedes, but leaves behind bright seashells on the sand. The sun goes down, but gentle warmth still lingers on the land. The music stops, and yet it lingers on in sweet refrain. For every joy that passes, something beautiful remains. Ladies and gentlemen, there is much that is beautiful that remains of the life of Patrick Henry McMullen. My name is Rennie Nisi O'Connell, and with me today are Simon and Stephen and Claudia, and of course in the background a team of staff here at Parkside. And we're privileged to have been entrusted with the care of Pat after his death and of conducting his service of farewell here at Parkside. It's been a privilege for me to have been asked to lead this service today, for it means that I've been invited to share in a very special time in the life of the McMullen family over these past few days. And I'm fortunate indeed to have been invited to do so. And so on behalf of the family, Pat's wife Tana, his children Fiona, Louise and John, I'd like to welcome you here and thank you for taking the time from what you would normally be doing on a Friday afternoon to be here. I'd also, on behalf of the family, like to welcome those of you who are watching this service via live streaming or at a later time. We know that it is not possible for everyone to be physically present to honour Pat's life and farewell him, but the family is so grateful for the love and support you have shown them. At the conclusion of the burial at the Central Coast Memorial Park on South Road, the family warmly invites you to move to the Penguin Football Club for a cuppa and a coldie maybe and a chat as we continue in remembering Pat's life. And so as we begin this service, if you haven't already done so, would you take a moment to please turn your mobile phone off or onto silent as your mark of respect for Pat. From the moment I walked into the home of Pat and Tana, I knew there was love in abundance. As I watched this family grieve and take their leave of Pat, I saw how much they treasured him and knew that they had been treasured by him. We have gathered here today in mourning and grief and loss. We've had the opportunity to share moments of Pat's life, the gifts he brought to his family and his extraordinary circle of friends, the richness of his talents, his knowledge of mining, people, connections, exercise, his love of learning and sharing. Many of you will have memories of Pat, and the family have asked that we include a time where you can come forward and share a brief memory of a special time you had with him or some way in which he touched your life. So I'm just letting you know that a little later in the service, that opportunity will be offered after the photo slideshow. But first we want to hear from some of the people who are closest to Pat. And so I'm going to ask Kieran and Anne-Marie to come forward, and then Malcolm Waterston, and then a little later Fiona, Louise and John. Thank you.
Patrick Henry McMullen. Patrick entered the world on Thursday, the 18th of December 1958. He was the fifth child for Norman and Millicent and came along after his sisters, Mary, Margaret and Nolene, and his brother John. He was born at Parramatta Hospital, and I dare say he would have heard the cheering from Cumberland Oval, the home of the mighty Parramatta Eels, the rugby league team he continued to follow all his life. The mighty blue and gold. After too many years for us to mention, Parramatta did make the grand final, and he was there to see it with his brother John and his brother-in-law Kevin. Patrick, as a baby, was a beautiful bonny baby who quickly developed a head full of blonde curls, and everybody remembered and loved those blonde curls. When Patrick was 2 years old, tragedy struck the family with the untimely death of his sister Nolene. 2 years later, his younger sister, Anne-Marie, me, was born. Patrick began school at St Bernadette's Primary School in 1963, and it was there that the lifelong friendship with Craig Dwyer and Kieran Anderson began.
I've been extremely fortunate to have Pat as my mate all my life. My mother told me we actually met before we went to school. Not surprising, as Castle Hill in the early 60s was a very small place, and the church community that both our families belonged to was even smaller. Pat and I did everything together when we were growing up, 2 peas in a pod. Our first day at St Bernadette's Primary School, we were together. Our first Holy Communion, we were together. Our confirmation, we were together. My dad being Pat's sponsor and Pat Dad's being my sponsor. Our first day at Oak Hill, we were together. Our last day of Oak Hill, we were together. We only lived about 300 metres away from each other, so we were constantly at each other's house or at the park.
In 1968, Patrick and I accompanied our parents on a 4-month round-the-world voyage that began sailing out of Sydney Harbour on the SS Arcadia to London. We then spent 3 months travelling the United Kingdom and Europe, and then we returned on the SS Orsova. Meeting and engaging with our Irish heritage was a highlight, along with visiting over 20 countries in that time. Growing up for us regularly involved family gatherings with numerous aunties, uncles and cousins. Our weekends involved Colo River picnics, family get-togethers, Sunday lunch down at Auntie Wynne and Pat's, visits to our Grandma McDonald, helping Dad in his orchid house or in the veggie patch, playing in the park that was at the back of our house, and going backward and forward to the Andersons' house in Gartho and Crescent. Sundays in summer would often find us heading to Harbord, an hour-and-a-half drive to the northern beaches, so that we could have a day at the beach. Holidays were to Sussex Inlet, Coffs Harbour, Southwest Rocks. Our backyard was our adventure playground. We created bike tracks around the yard, played hide and seek, and Patrick was the most creative in finding hiding places. Looking for blue-tongue lizards under our house, making swings from the old gum tree, building cubby houses and billy carts, and there are a few scratches and scrapes from those billy carts. Sporting skills were honed at number 8 Oldcastle Hill Road, hitting the cricket ball against the shed door, backyard cricket with the metal garbage bin as the stumps, seeing how far we could kick the footy from one side of the yard to see if we could get it into next doors. There was shuttlecock, there was tennis. And often Dad would take the boys to watch Parramatta at Cumberland Oval or to see Australia play cricket or rugby.
In our junior days, a typical afternoon was to walk home from school about 2 k's because we lived too close to justify a bus pass. We would go home, get changed, grab our bikes and meet in the park. Pat lived adjacent to the park. In fact, the McMullens had a back gate directly onto the park. There it would become anything from footy, golf, racing around on the bikes, blowing up empty cans with thundercrackers to see who could get the highest can, of course. Any game at all. There were only 2 rules our parents laid down. Don't go near the toilets and don't ride through the rose garden. We could also disappear on our bikes all around Castle Hill, maybe down to the pool at Roxburgh Park, maybe to the forbidden willow tree, maybe right down to Excelsior Avenue for a bushwalk or walk, or maybe to another friend's place in the area. We could end up anywhere. Again, there was one rule: be home before the streetlights came on. Whilst this could be a typical afternoon after school, it also went on weekend after weekend unless family things got in the way. We also spent a great deal of time at each other's houses, fooling around. I can also clearly remember some key McMullen memories. Having dinner at the McMullens, roast if I recall, with Pat's mum's Millicent fussing around the tribe of hers, riding my bike down through the park, across the wooden bridge, through the back gate, weaved down through the orchid sheds, and nearly running into Pat's dad, Norm, lying on a banana bed with the radio on, either listening to the cricket or the football, depending which season it was. I remember waving goodbye at the dock when they went on their overseas trip and Pat throwing a streamer. I also remember going to Auntie Pat and Auntie Wynn's place for their welcome home party, and I thought he was gone for years. I was surprised it was only 4 months. We also had huge bonfires, at McMullen's Auntie Pat and Wynn's place each year, and I remember Mr. Nolan pouring petrol on the huge fire and standing back to watch the explosion. And I do remember going to Hardboard Beach in the back of that old Holden station wagon. Pat was included in many of my family holidays as well. The entrance was a favourite and we visited it many times. One camping trip, we ended up at Dalmorton in the middle of nowhere, halfway between Grafton and Glen Innes if you're interested, and with a huge hailstorm that dented the cars, but the old tent stood up to it. Pat and I slept in a covered trailer. It was a great tent, if not a little hot.
So Patrick joined John at Oak Hill College in 1969 to begin Year 5. The brothers had 1 year together before John left to join the workforce. In Pat's time at Oak Hill, he was involved in cadets, cricket and rugby, as well as study. Patrick, like his dad, was a talented wicket keeper and... what was he? Oh, breakaway. I keep saying fly half, and it wasn't a fly half, it was a breakaway. So, like his dad, cricket and wicketkeeper and a rugby breakaway. Patrick's first job was with our brother-in-law Kevin at Cooper's Poultry and Hatchery. He was, first of all, in the egg processing room, boxing up the eggs, quickly moved up the ladder to candling, checking for any deformities in the eggs. And then the piece de resistance was the pulp room, which we always knew when we worked in the pulp room because it smelled so bad. As Patrick was preparing to sit his school certificate in Year 10, our father passed away. Patrick was given exemption for one of his exams, but he sat the rest and he gained very good results. He went on to Year 12, where he was named Dux of the college.
Pat and I also had some great holidays together once we had our driving licences. I have a photo somewhere of Pat leaning on the bonnet of my car, the obligatory surfboards on the roof rack, of course, with his bucket hat on, pointing at a map spread over the bonnet. I'm not sure if we were lost or he was just posing for the photo. We used to pull up camp, spread asleep under our hutchies and cook over a fire. It was great times. An unusual occurrence happened whenever Pat and I were together. We would get a fit of the giggles. Normally over nothing, but we couldn't stop for love nor money. It happened all our lives. Two great examples that stick in my mind were a Christmas nativity play when we were about in Year 4. Pat and I were two of the three wise men. As turbans, we had beach towels rolled up on our legs to make the hat and the balance of the towel hanging down the back. As we made our grand entrance down the beginning of the big hall, one of us stood on the other's turban as we mounted the stage. It promptly became undone. We both burst into giggles and we couldn't stop. In the end, the entire audience was laughing and it became a well-known event at St Bernadette's. The next event happened many years later. We were up at the entrance, with our own cars at this stage, and Pat thought it would be a great idea to borrow his his uncle's surf ski and have a go. Okay, so this we did. We took it down to Shelley Beach, we launched the surf ski, each having turns while the other body surfed. Anyway, we got into trouble. Big trouble. We ended up being taken out to sea, but managed to get the oar between us and both lean on the ski sideways. We managed to get back to shore, fell down in a heap and started giggling. This turned into major laughter and we couldn't get up for about 15 minutes. When we did drag the ski back towards the car, it was then that we noticed the dangerous surf, beach closed signs. No wonder we didn't see any other surfers out there. And of course, the giggles started again. I don't think we ever told anyone about that story.
It's the first time I've heard it as well. Patrick went on to study mining engineering and geology at the University of Sydney. After the first year or two, he did drop the geology, but always did continue to love rocks. He successfully completed his engineering degree During this time, he went to do field trips in outback Queensland, Northern Territory and Tasmania. He ended up accepting a position at Mount Lyell Copper in Queenstown on the west coast. He came home as often as he could, and as our mother became increasingly unwell, he came back for a visit in time for us both to be with her when she passed in 1982. We, his brother and sisters, could see that Patrick was feeling very settled in Tasmania and was certainly getting involved and being a big part of this community. He was making the most of his time on the Tasmanian wild west coast. And of course, this is where he met his perfect match in Tana, and we could see that he knew she was the one, and we could also see that she knew he was the one.
When we left school, we went to our respective unis. We still got together with a close group of mates from school, Craig, Eric, Steve and Frank, and we frequented the Vicar, the local pub, which we frequented on quite a number of occasions. Pat kept playing cricket in the old boys team for many years until he went interstate to follow his career. I'm sure Pat's family have a lot of memories to reminisce about the times together. Camping, running, hiking, sailing, I'm just tired saying it all, and just sitting around as a family group. Spending time with the family was always a priority for Pat, something that you think you'd look back on one day and say, I'm glad we did that. I'm sure Pat is saying that now. That's it.
I officially met Pat in 1987, although we had seen each other around the traps before that, when we were both living in Queenstown. He was a mining engineer, as we know, at the Mount Lyell Mining Company, and I worked as a school psychologist with the Education Department. In those days, Queenstown was a lively place with many young single Education Department workers, many young single mining workers, and lots of parties. Many met their future partners in Queenstown, and I was one of them. Pat and I left Queenstown in mid-1988 with a round-the-world ticket for a year. Our farewell party was held in Pat's tiny flat. It was the bicentennial year, so we decided to go with the theme. Pat dressed as Her Majesty the Queen. He liked dressing as women. Only for dress-up parties, though. So, complete with a regal dress from the op shop, a wig and a crown and rubber gloves. Her Majesty greeted everyone as they came to the door, graciously shaking their hand, onto which he'd smeared a dollop of Vaseline on his hand. Pat loved a practical joke. We travelled overseas for a year, going into Beijing when there were no cars, only bikes, over to Europe and into Russia, working in England and returning via the US and New Zealand. And he proposed to me in Rhodes. We camped in our small tent, which our son now has, still going strong, stayed in youth hostels and took advantage of the hospitality of friends. Where am I to? We returned to Tasmania, settled in Zeehan, Pat working at Renison. We married in January 1990 and got a dog, Jessie, then had a baby. That's the right order, isn't it? Fiona was born in January 91, followed by Louise in December 1992. Pat loved being a father, was a very hands-on dad. He would get up in the middle of the night, change, nappy and bring Louise in to me for a feed, check on Fiona and still get up very early to go to work. He said that he was embarrassed to find himself singing a Wiggles song out loud while driving a young colleague to work. While we were in Zeehan, Pat joined the sailing club, so many Saturdays in summer were spent at the beach at Strawn. He also started running and completed the Zeehan to Strawn Marathon with the support of some very good friends. Running gradually became a passion, more so when the kids had left home. And the friendships we made on the West Coast have remained and in many cases strengthened. We moved to Kambalda, 40 minutes from Kalgoorlie, in October 95, where Pat worked for Western Mining Corporation in their nickel mine. Our third child, John, was born there in January 1996. We spent 3.5 years there, again making some wonderful friends and seeing a lot of Western Australia. Regular trips to Esperance and camping at Lucky Bay with friends and outback drives were highlights. We then moved back to Tasmania. Pat had a 10-week contract in Mount Isa just before and after the move, returning midway to drive us all back across the Nullarbor. We decided to settle in Penguin, and Pat became a drive-in, drive-out worker on the West Coast. He wanted to spend more time with the family, so he worked part-time, which meant I could also work part-time. Over the years, he worked at Henty Gold Mine, Renison and Rosebery, usually driving down very early in the morning, working, staying overnight, then driving home the next day for a late dinner and time with the kids, then back again to whichever mine early the next day. Pat later started working as a consultant with an ex-Kambalda colleague who was in Perth. This meant he could work from home and was able to participate more with the kids' many extracurricular activities. Plus he could do more of what he loved: run, play tennis, sea kayak, bushwalk, travel, etc. Pat continued to run while he was receiving treatment and to play tennis, ride his bike and bushwalk until he no longer could. We even completed the Three Capes track in November last year. We did some pretty decent times. Pat retired in 2016 once he got his cancer diagnosis. We were determined not to let this stop us doing things, and we managed to fit in a heck of a lot in the next 4.5 years. We had many memorable holidays overseas on the mainland and within Tassie, often with dear friends and family. We always tried to fit in a visit to friends or family wherever we went, and they were spread far and wide across Australia and even overseas. Caravanning around central Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia was the highlight of 2019. Pat loved the times we camped by a river and we could sit in the evening or morning watching the birds. We had great plans for 2020, but COVID put paid to that. Pat was my best friend. Like most couples, we grew to have so many shared interests. Apart from his passion for watching almost any kind of sport on TV, which I definitely did not share, and I'd have to put up with the yells and screams of disappointment with some of the rugby games.
Parramatta for sure.
We loved to attend music festivals and performances, and many of the festivals with our kids who surprisingly weren't embarrassed to be seen with us. We also loved going to jazz concerts and to the Tas Symphony Orchestra. Pat became a fan of classical music after one such concert I dragged him to, so much so that he started learning classical pieces on the piano, reading about the various composers and studying music theory. He even recorded music theory lessons for the kids during COVID. Family and friends were the most important things to Pat. He so enjoyed spending time with friends, and he would just have loved to have been here to see you all. He loved seeing our extended families, keeping up with what all the nieces and nephews were doing, and he absolutely adored his children. He was so proud of them, what they'd done, and the kind of adults they had become. We always said how lucky we'd been with our kids, that they were healthy, happy, well-rounded, close to each other and to us. He would be even more proud of them today. We've also received so much support over the years, and especially at this time, from friends and family and the Penguin community. They've wrapped their arms around us, literally and metaphorically. It's been truly humbling to feel the love and support from everyone. We thank you all.
Fiona, Louise and John. Perhaps you after your mum. Yeah.
In one of the final conversations we had with Dad, he told us he wasn't perfect. Of course, we know that nobody is absolutely perfect, but our dad came as close to any. In that moment, it was difficult to put into words just how perfect he was and why. It isn't possible to tell you all the things that made him the greatest dad the three of us could have had. Perhaps if he had another 30 years to listen, we might come close.
Growing up, we had this sense of richness. This wasn't because we were given expensive things or because we knew what our parents earned. Brand names weren't encouraged, and while others had PlayStations and big televisions, we had a 20-minute daily limit on computer time. When we were finally allowed to have our first game console, it was none other than the Wii Sport, permissible for its less sedentary nature and multiplayer, aka social ability. Mum and Dad always insisted on second-hand cars and bikes, and we were given a $1 limit on icy poles that didn't quite increase proportionally with inflation. And don't even think about taking more than 30 seconds to choose, otherwise Dad would be choosing for us. There was a maximum earning potential of about $4 for cleaning the car, inside and out. This was made slightly more lucrative by the possibility of finding Dad's latest hiding spot for his Minties or Jaffas. But no, this feeling wasn't attributed to money or objects. This feeling was because we were always made to feel rich and full in love and opportunity. Mum and Dad gave us the most valuable thing they could after each other. They gave us their time. Whether it was coaching my soccer team, handing Louise half a banana at half-time, or leaving work early to pick Fiona up from dancing, Dad sacrificed his time for ours. He cut down his work week to 3 days to spend more time at home with us. Weekends were spent travelling across the state to mountains, waterfalls, festivals, beaches, and visiting family and friends. If there was a new sight to see or experience to be had, we were offered the opportunity. Mum and Dad spent their weekdays ferrying us to music lessons, sport, and extracurricular activities. Holidays were full of interstate and occasionally international trips. It was important to Mum and Dad that we connected with our extended family and heritage. And for these things, we were so grateful. We really are blessed with the most wonderful extended family and friends, and we know we were privileged to have this upbringing.
Dad had quite the sense of humour, subtle, sometimes deadpan, occasionally sarcastic, often lame, almost never lost on us. You need only take a trip back to 2014 on Dad's Facebook page to the goat wedding to sort of understand the way Dad's mind worked when it came to humour. While you're on the socials, mosey on over to @Pat of Penguins Insta to be treated to a sit-down comedy gig. Highlights include a photo of John's entire soccer team's washing on the line, posted on the second Sunday of May, captioned simply, "Happy Mother's Day." A post alongside Judy Ray that read, "Penguin crew at end of Gone Nuts 25k run. Judy Ray, second female home. I was first male with red hat in right pocket." True. And accompanying a photo of a herd of cows near our house during one quarantine last year was, "Day 4 of isolation. We should be okay if there's no meat on the shelves." If you get back to Dad's first post, a close-up of a sock with a solitary hair on it captioned, "Hairy foot," you've gone too far. Or perhaps just far enough. One year on Christmas morning, we excitedly opened our heavier-than-usual Christmas stockings to find Santa had wasted no expense on Hobart's finest potatoes and rocks. Mrs. Claus must have been on long service leave that year. He would start emails with "Dear Offspring" and sign off with "Love, Father." And we can't forget Dad's favourite joke. Why did Sally fall off the swing? Because Sally was a carrot. We don't get it either, don't worry.
Dad was one of the most knowledgeable people we knew. He was our go-to for so many questions. Practical, historical, the world's working, finances, share advice, politics, the list goes on. Dad will know the answer, I would say. He had a way of explaining complex concepts in very simple, easy to understand way. He knew so much about trees and rocks. Dad taught us the art of Sudokus and card games. He was the best 500 player we knew. He would post cryptic crossword clues in our family chat and create video tutorials of music theory. Dad showed us the joy in looking at the stars and finding constellations and knowing which planets shone the brightest. He taught us how to cook a good steak with mushroom sauce, and that hot chips taste better with vinegar and are almost as well paired as banana sandwiches are with sugar and lemon. Dad kept a card from John in pride of place in the shed that read, "I love my dad because he plays with me." And play with us he did. He shared with us the joy of music, both listening and playing, and encouraged us to try activities of every kind imaginable: tennis, squash, cricket, soccer, golf, table tennis, pool, swimming, dancing, rugby, bodyboarding and kayaking, just to name a few. He was bloody good at most of them too. And of course, our love of running no doubt stemmed from handicap runs he set up for us most times we went to the beach. Running became an increasingly big part of Dad's lives and our lives with him. Running with him brought us all so much joy and pride, whether he was running in front, beside, in baggy trackies and holy cap, or riding when he wasn't able to run. Christmas Day park run became an annual tradition, dressed up of course, and most Saturday mornings you could find any one of us, if not all, taking part in a park run somewhere in the state or on the mainland. Dad was always the first to give us kudos on Strava, the first to look up and analyse our results, and had so much belief in our ability to run further and faster than we ourselves thought possible. This belief extended to all facets of our lives. He helped us train for significant running events, including what would have been the Great Ocean Road Running Festival had COVID not hit, in which we were all planning runs further than we'd ever run before to fundraise for the Prostate Cancer Foundation. Dad was there for us, there for what turned into a virtual transcontinental event, and jogged parts that he could. And that day, we did all run further or faster than ever before. We had expected that we'd be by Dad's side when he ran his milestone 50th park run. He made it to 49. Tomorrow, here at Burnie Park Run, we and his extended family, and anyone else who would like to join us, 9 a.m, will be running in his honour.
Dad had a way of making every situation that bit more interesting and fun. He set up the annual footy tipping and Melbourne Cup sweeps, for which the stakes were very high. Winners would receive one whole block of Cadbury chocolate, while the loser would be awarded 2 single squares, which would arrive in the mail in the weeks following. His chosen topic for a family Zoom trivia night was all about meat. He awarded points for us mooing, oinking, and crowing. For a short while after he discovered emoticons, he used these as his preferred form of text communication. And here we were all thinking, based on his semi-joking pronunciation of Trey Bean at the dinner table, that he'd never be bilingual. Instead of the traditional method of waking someone, Dad would often play the piano, conveniently situated outside our bedroom doors, to encourage us out of bed. At the beach, we'd invariably hear the classic, "Last one in is a rotten egg, and you wouldn't want to be a rotten egg, would you?" Other times, we'd be minding our own business and suddenly notice a light flashing across our eyes. We'd look up to see him grinning with his wristwatch intentionally reflecting the sun onto us. Dad used 20 cents as a common incentive, 20 cents for swimming 5 metres. We were basically professional. 20 cents for finishing our water bottle each day. And perhaps to balance out the dent in his wallet, he went through a phase of threatening to charge us for the electricity used for lights we left on.
Dad had plenty of unique songs and sayings. A quick game's a fast game, the classic, good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite, but with his twist at the end, and no wandering, we think due to sleepwalking habits. And his favourite nighttime sign-off was, I hope the fairies dance on your toes. If we were around when Dad caught sight of himself in a mirror, he'd commence his routine of poses, announce, what a specimen, and then launch into a song starting with, oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. One of his favourite songs, the Goldfish song, went something like this. A goldfish in a bowl goes, or the goldfish in the bowl goes, round and round and round and round and round and round and round. Join in if you get the hang of the words. And round 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 and round. Come see us later for the full rendition, as well as other hits like the Duck Song and Oh Penguin, You Beauty. With Dad and Mum in it, healthy and happy, life was pretty perfect. And if Dad was the male embodiment of the model parent, then you, Mum, you are the female equivalent. We always felt so lucky, and we are so lucky. We never took this feeling of luck or each other for granted, but Dad's diagnosis made every moment we shared all the more special. The words "I love you" were said so often and only gained more meaning each time. If it were possible to bring this family and our friends even closer, cancer did just that.
Dad may be gone, but his presence will always be felt. It's here in this room right now, our beautiful family and friends, and in the community who have overwhelmed us with support. He'll be at the forefront of our minds when we're walking down the aisle or standing at the altar. Our kids won't get the chance to meet him, but they will know him. They'll know their grandfather, and Dad, you would have made the best grandfather. We'll do our best to pass on the life lessons you tried so hard to ingrain in us. We'll make sure they always know to place pens facing down in the jar, to warm their coffee cups before pouring in the coffee, and to always slow down well before and obey red lights, except when they're in unnecessary places like Penguin and we're running late for parkrun. Then they're optional. We'll show them the beauty that is life, just as you and Mum showed us. You're intelligent, you are talented, you are strong, you're a comedian, you're a dag, you're an inspiration, you're all things good. And above all, you are our gentle, playful, loving dad. And you were perfect.
Well, you can see why I wanted to go in front of those guys. Well done. I first met Pat in 1984 in Queenstown on the reputedly wild, remote west coast of Tasmania. He was working as a mining engineer with the Mount Lyell Mining Company. We quickly became friends. He was a kind of quiet, reserved guy, unassuming, but with an easy manner, smiling eyes, and a wry grin. He was a sporty all-rounder, playing squash, rugby union, tennis, and golf, much more skillfully than myself or lots of others. It was only on the mountains that I could compete with him. In Queenstown in the 80s, we had to make our own entertainment. There was sport, and there was the social scene, pretty much the pub. The town was small, and the weather was often wet and cold. There were not many eligible single girls around, but on Thursday, the Contiki tours came to town. Mainly young women, and passed through the town. The young engineers, after a hit of squash, would adjourn to the Four Seasons bar on Queenstown High Street for a refreshment or five. And just by coincidence, the Contiki girls would be having a counter meal. The boys, Pat amongst them, would delight in showing off their flexibility to the girls by hooking their ankles over their necks and also performing other contortions using broomsticks. Some of the girls would also demonstrate their skills, but of course moved on with the tour. Other single girls came on the scene, and on a memorable Sunday morning outing to climb Mount Dundas, just outside Queenstown, my wife Sue and I were accompanied by just Pat and this New girl in town, Tarna. It was just a short half-hour drive to the start of the track. We got out of the car, Pat glanced at me, and I knew without a word being spoken that Pat really liked her. Pat's eyes were always so expressive. Pat and I were involved in many bushwalking expeditions to all sorts of mountain ranges around Tasmania. The weather almost always turned out diabolical. This did work to our advantage on Federation Peak, however. Pat had been there before with John Carswell and others, but had failed to reach the summit due to a fear of heights. On a return trip to the mountain with myself and Neil Vaugh, we succeeded. The weather was so bad and the clouds so thick and the rain so heavy, Pat couldn't observe the fearful fall of 1,000 feet directly down a cliff to Lake Jeeves, so the climb was completed without so much difficulty. Sailing was another interest Pat and I shared. We hatched a plan to sail around the world and looked at buying a yacht that was for sale in Wynyard. We had no blue water sailing experience, just a can-do attitude. Fortunately for us, the mine manager at the Mount Lyell Mining Company got wind of this, didn't want to lose Pat, and immediately offered a promotion and big pay rise. An offer too good to refuse, so that the trip was canned, and I'm sure Sue and Tarna were very happy about that. Instead, we did a bareboat charter in the Whitsunday Islands in Queensland with Sue and Tarna. While on the yacht, Tarna amazed us. She asked Pat and I if it was okay she'd go topless. We just looked at one another as if we would refuse. You just confirmed that it wasn't a false memory. We also met up again with Pat and Tarna in the UK as they travelled together prior to their wedding at Tarna's parents' house in Devonport. After their wedding, the McMullens settled in Zeehan, where Fiona and Louise were born. Then they left Tasmania for work and life on the mainland, Tarna pregnant with John. When they returned to Tasmania, Pat had become a family man, and a very good one. With our kids in tow, we subjected them to a few character-building activities, like backpacking and camping at Lee's paddocks. Time passed quickly as the children went through school and university, but Pat and I did find time for further expeditions to the Western Arthurs and to the Mount Anne circuit, with other characters in tow, including John Carswell, Tim Lack, and some of my friends from Scotland. Pat and Tarna were a great team, and the strength of character Pat demonstrated throughout his illness was an inspiration. Despite the terrible deck of cards they were dealt, Pat and Tarna always looked forward in a positive manner and were able to achieve lots of their bucket list. And as well, they were able to devote time to their 3 beautiful children and other family and friends. Pat never gave in to the illness. He continued running, cycling and walking until 4 weeks before he died. Sue and I were fortunate enough to spend a couple of days with Pat and Tarna at the start of February at 9 Mile Beach on Dolphin Sands. We walked on the beach both days. Pat and I walked 3 kilometres to the end of the beach and then back again. Not another soul on the beach. On that walk, he told me he wasn't scared of dying, and that what he had loved most about his life, was his family, and how proud he was of all of them, including their partners. He talked about them on that walk. In John, he sees a reflection of himself in his younger days. Relaxed, a bit casual, but with purpose. In Louise, he admires her strong competitive spirit, which is a reflection of his own. In Fiona, he loves her creative skills, which he would have liked to have had more of himself. In his dying days, as his strength ebbed, I watched that strength transferring to you kids and to you too, Tarna. To watch the way in which you all cared for Pat during all of his illness, but particularly in his last few days, was inspirational. He was a lucky guy. Carrie, my daughter, and a friend of the McMullen kids tells me that you've all taken up running in honour of the great father and inspiration that Pat was, and are now regularly doing 10-kilometre runs. Indeed, Louise, you did a personal best of 5 kilometres under 20 minutes for the first time just before Pat died. And that Fiona has completed her 50th park run. John, the girls are pissed off that you warm up for a run by putting the heater on in the car. yet you can still perform. In conclusion, I hope that you can all cherish Pat's memory and maintain your lives in the positive attitude in which Pat led his. Thank you.
There are times when a respectful round of applause is entirely appropriate, and this is one of them. I'm going to skip over some of my notes so that we don't replicate what's already been said so beautifully. But when I spoke with his family the other day, I asked them to describe him to me. And his children said he was just beautiful, and their eyes filled with tears as they searched for the right words to describe him. His extended family told me that when Pat spoke, you actually wanted to listen to what he had to say. He was never pushy. He was very happy to share his opinions, but he would never force them on you. Hearing a cancer diagnosis in 2016, as Tana has said, changed life for them all. But I was really amazed as I heard that he still went to perform and run in marathons, especially if there was a fundraising component, that he could promote a cause that he cared about. Sometimes he could only walk it with a very small run to say that he had done it. I also heard that in true Pat style, he volunteered to drive for the Cancer Council, transporting other cancer sufferers to their treatment. He didn't talk a lot about his approaching death, only to say that he had no idea what it would be like on the other side of it. He breathed his last, surrounded by the people that he had loved most in life, his needs tenderly cared for, on Sunday, February the 28th, 2020.
Is there nothing you can't do, Dad?
And now it's your turn, if you would like to share a brief story of an encounter, a connection, a shared interest you had with Pat, if you would like to.
I think a lot of this has already been said, but I guess with Pat, the thing that I really remember about him is whenever we got together, we always did stuff. And so for me, there was a lot of golf, and in some, insanely bad weather. I remember one game at Barnbougle, which in wind that you couldn't stand up and the sand was blowing out of the bunkers. And lots of kayaking trips. It was an epic journey with some other members of Pat's family on Lake Pedder, and another one around Freycinet, which is strong in my memory. But the one thing I was really thinking of, I was trying to think of one special thing, and it was another kayaking trip, and it was I'd been out by myself on the Derwent, and got really excited around Cornelian Bay. I'd seen a dolphin. I'd never had a close encounter with a dolphin before, and I was excited about it. And so, of course, I did what everybody does these days and put it on Facebook, And of course, nobody believed me because I didn't have any photos or anything. And anyway, the next week, Pat was in Hobart, so we went up for a paddle, and we were just going under the Derwent Bridge, and Tasman Bridge. And like everybody else, Pat was obviously doubted, and said, so where's this dolphin then? And as the last word came out of his mouth, this dolphin pops up beside the boat, and I don't know, I probably said something like, ye of little faith, and before I got that out, there was another one come up on the other side, and there was one almost between us, and then there were 5, and then there were 10, and then there were 20. And the river was exploding with dolphins, and Pat was just so happy and overjoyed, and was loving it. Because, who wouldn't, And so I remember him being really happy. And of course, I had to be really cool and say, "Oh no, it's always like this on the Derwent." But that's just one memory, and there's probably lots of you have got memories, something like that if you think about them. There's something personal and special time you spent with them. Thanks.
I was a bit surprised that I was friends with Pat. We reunited about 10 years ago, especially after those games of rugby on the West Coast where I was rubbing his face in the mud. And he was trying to run away from me playing for West Coast. And he'd just turn, he wouldn't say anything, he'd just turn to the umpire and he'd go. I used to do that a lot in the game, so I'd probably get him about 20 times. But we got together over social tennis at the Alverson Tennis Club, and John was a regular partner with Pat in the doubles, and Vincent and I. And it was just great fun playing along. And then one year we made the grand final of the Alverston B-grade social doubles. And it was the worst, least enjoyable game of tennis that either of us had played. Pat would miss the ball, well, not miss it, but shank it a bit. Balls would be going high on the wire at the back. And after about an hour of play, I said over the net to Pat, "Are you feeling a little bit tight?" And sure enough, we were. And it's something that we shared afterwards for a long time, laughed about how you could play all season, play competitive sport all your life, and then social B-grade tennis gets you. We did a lot of running together, and we really enjoyed that. And the analysis that people have spoken about before was a great thing that I enjoyed doing with him as well. He was a great hand for me when the local running club adopted some digital electronic timing, and he was a great help in trying to set that up. And I don't know quite what the neighbours thought though when we had the mats as antennas set up in our cul-de-sac at home in Ulverston, and we were doing sprints across these mats in timing in the cul-de-sac, and we did this for an hour on a few occasions, trying to work out positioning of the mats and timing and how all the equipment worked. But it was quite a sight for the neighbours, seeing a couple of old people running flat out. And people have talked a lot about the laughter that you have and those giggling moments with Pat. One such occasion was when Pat and I decided we were going to learn to play the guitar. And we sort of nearly did, and it was a bit like on the recorder. Pat perseveres. Pat's got an ear for music. I haven't got anything like what Pat had up there. And we've learned to play that song that most people learn to play on the guitar, My Brown-Eyed Girl. And we recorded it. We showed Tana and Anne that, and very quickly our popularity went sky high from 0 to 2. We thought it was a good time to stop, and that was when Anne named our band the Lead Balloon. But we had a great time with Pat and his family and his other friends, and it's a very sad moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I was the first shepherd. And I had no bloody idea why everyone was laughing. And so I delivered my lines perfectly. Roll ahead. Okay. St George and Parramatta in the 1977 Grand Final. He was a Parramatta supporter, I was a St George supporter. And I think Mick Cronin was coming up for the kick to win the game or draw the game, I can't remember. And that's right. And he missed it. And I was bloody happy. And Patrick was extremely unhappy because they'd lost the grand final to Manly the year before. 77 wasn't going to be their year either because they got flogged 20-0 by St George in the replay. Anyway, but the draw was a good game. And the other memorable evening we spent together was that we spent the night on the beach at the entrance. Frank Neville was there, I was there, Patrick was there. And I said I could sing every song off the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album by Elton John. And I did. Much to their annoyance, because I think I won some money as a result of doing it. He was a good man, he was a great friend of mine, and we're going to miss him. See ya.
I don't have many funny anecdotes, I'm afraid, to share about Patrick, but I did want to just remark that Patrick, to me, was the epitome of someone who was comfortable in their own skin. And that attribute of Patrick's meant that people around him were comfortable. So I thought that was a wonderful quality of Pat. In his case, it was never about him. He had no ego. It was all about who he was with. And so that was really important too to me as well. He never had a bad word to say about anybody. He had that optimism and upbeat nature. So I just will finish with one happening, and that was we were playing night cricket one time at Eric Sheeran's place. It was actually the day of the first day-night match that was ever played by Australia, but we got in first. I think it was a bit darker at Eric's than there. And the ball was suddenly appearing out of the darkness into the light and have a swing at it and all that sort of thing. But after we played some of that cricket,
then Frank Neville decided to ride a bike around in the dark, and Pat didn't think that was appropriate, so he solved that problem by crash tackling him off the bike. So that's one enduring memory I have of Pat, so thank you very much.
Didn't really expect to be getting up here, but had a couple of funny stories. We've heard about Pat's infamous Instagram account, Pat of Penguin. We've always called into the McMullens on many occasions, and one time Mum left her hat there and I left my sunglasses there. And the way that Pat wanted to let us know that we'd left our things behind was upload a selfie of himself on Instagram wearing my sunglasses and Mum's hat. And we also shared shared passion, or shared rage, I should say, for the Penguin traffic lights and the recent upgrade, the most pointless traffic lights in the Northwest Coast. But just the last couple of weeks, I found myself sitting there at the red light, right-hand turn, with no other cars around, and the light has stayed red, and I've thought of Pat and I've just run the red light. Don't tell anyone.
Pat used to not really make a big deal of his birthdays, or not like to make a big deal of his birthday. So one day, when it was coming up to not a significant birthday, because fortunately he had great parties when they came around, but it was a lesser birthday, and I was a teacher, so I had, access to big rolls of paper, so we made this gigantic poster, happy birthday banner, it was just huge, and walked down the main street of Penguin and up to Pat's place to wish him happy birthday, because he didn't really want to make a fuss.
I wasn't really prepared for this, but I was just thinking back to the first time I met Pat was at a kid's birthday party at Janine's house, and it must have been a 3 or 4 year old's party, and there was a hopping competition, and all the kids joined in, and all going quite well, but they started dropping off one by one, and till eventually it got down to 2 brothers, and it must have gone on for about another 5 minutes, I reckon. And anyway, Pat and I were in hysterics, and these two boys, at the end of it, neither of them gave up, but they ended up in a fist fight and rolling around on the floor. It was very funny, and that sort of set the scene. Not the fist fight, but the laughter sort of set the scene for Pat and my friendship, because we had so many encounters, barbecues, kids' birthdays, and these guys welcomed us into their family and their group, and we became the Main Street gang, and lots and lots of good memories. But the thing that stands out to me the most with Pat was that he was a man of integrity. And there's an old saying that goes something like this. It's if a man lives with integrity, his family are blessed. And I see that with you guys. He lived with integrity, and you guys are blessed as a result. And what I loved about him was he was a man of integrity, but he loved his family so much, and he loved you, Tana, and your kids, and he really modelled to you guys and to the rest of us what it is to be a good man. That's how I could sum him up. Pat was a good man. And if there was a life well lived, Pat nailed it. Okay.
Very hard acts to follow. My heart rate's up. I went to uni with Pat and studied mining engineering at Sydney Uni. And we had two Pats doing mining, and Pat was always young Pat. And so we had young Pat and old Pat. And just this morning, I was talking to another friend from uni to find out stories on Pat that you can imagine 40, 50 years ago, the memories are vague, and we decided that what mining at Sydney University taught us was to play 500 and to drink copious quantities of beer at the Native Rose. So Pat and I sort of met up again in Tassie about 15 years ago when we were both working at Henty, and then we both ended up working at Rosebery, and so we're both living up the coast, and we'd carpool. So Pat and I'd be driving the hour and 15 minutes down to Rosebery and back every day, and as boys do, we got talking about sex. And one time coming back from Rosebery, we were seeing the Waratahs. They were out, and Pat knew the trees and where the best blooms were, but one time there was a field of irises that had come out just past the finger post, and we both thought, well, this could be a good opportunity if we took a bunch of flowers home to our respective wives. So we're out picking irises to take home, full of hope of what may ensue. So the next morning we're driving back down to Rosebery. How'd you go? Can't talk about it. Wonderful fella. We've missed a good man.
As our time of reflection and gratitude draws to a close, I'd like to invite Pat's music teacher, Ralph Anderson, and Pat's daughter Louise, who's going to come and accompany him and by singing and playing Let It Be. The words are printed in your service sheet if you'd like to sing along, or maybe you'd like to use this time to offer a prayer for Pat and maybe thank God for his life if you are so minded. Thank you.
It's on. Now it's
on. Oh, we turned it off. And I'd just like to say that not only was Ralph Dad's guitar teacher and piano teacher, he was Dad's very dear friend as well.
Introduction. Please join in.
Speaking words of wisdom.
Pat and Tana had a wonderful marriage. Wasn't it always a smooth journey? For life has its ups and downs. But as Anne-Marie said the other day, every time I visited Pat and Tana, I was inspired. I came away feeling that I was a better person, challenged to live my life in a better way because I watched how they lived theirs. They're powerful words. Tana, the loss of Pat will leave an empty space that will be so hard to fill. Know that as you build this very different life that you didn't want and you didn't ask for, you are loved and you are supported by each person here. Your children are so grateful for the way you cared for Pat during his illness, for standing by his side during the tests, the surgical procedures, the chemotherapy, the illness and exhaustion. It's an awful journey to be on, but you held his hand and you walked that journey with him. To Fiona and Shane, Louise and John, Pat saturated your life with his love, a fabulous example of how to live your life and live it with strength and courage. Take those qualities and grow them in your own lives. And when you have children of your own, as you have already said, speak of him to them, allowing Pat to live on. To Mary and Kevin, Margaret and Peter, John and Kathy, Anne-Marie and Sean, Pat was a treasured brother and brother-in-law. He has been part of your lives forever. Hold on to those memories and cherish them. To the Boryovich family, Pat was a much-loved son-in-law of Margaret and Rade when he was alive, brother-in-law of Steven and Kat, John and Moya, David and Lisa. He was adored by their families. They only had good to say about him. For us, the rest of us, he was a dear friend, neighbour, colleague, workmate. As we know, Pat was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2016. Had Pat been tested sooner for this disease that affects so many men in our society, he may still be alive today. If there is one message that Pat's family would love each bloke here today to take hold of, it is to get checked regularly by your GP for your PSA levels and have the associated tests. And if those levels are elevated, please get it investigated and monitored closely. And if you can, please donate today to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia. That would be a meaningful way of honouring Pat. The donation boxes are out in the foyer and we will have them again at the cemetery. Please come and ask us. Today, John, Shane, Kevin, Peter and Kieran are going to come forward. Pat has walked or run beside them many times in their lives, and today they have the honour of carrying him from this place. As we prepare to leave, ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand?
Though the days are long, twilight sings a song of the happiness that used to be. Soon my eyes will close, soon I'll find repose, and in dreams you're always near to me. I'll see you in my dreams, hold you in my dreams. Someone took you out of my arms, still I feel the thrill of your charms. lips that once were mine, tender eyes that shine, they will light my way tonight. I'll see you in my dreams. I'll see you in my dreams. Hold you in my dreams. Someone took you out of my arms. Still I feel the thrill of your charm. Lips that once were mine, tender eyes that shine, they will light my way tonight. I'll see you in my dreams. They will light my lonely way tonight. I'll see you in my dreams.
You remember me when the west wind moves among the fields of barley. You can tell the sun in his jealous sky when we walked in fields of gold. So she took her love for to gaze a while among the fields of barley. In his arms she fell as her hair came down among the fields of gold. Will you stay with me? Will you be my love among the fields of barley? And you can tell the sun in his jealous sky when we walked in fields of gold. I never made promises lightly, and there have been some